So you have created your texture in Photoshop, or you've begun to, and it's it's all well and good, but we don't know what it's going to look like on our 3D model. How can we see that? Well, Maya will allow you to apply a texture. So when we create a material, we normally just give it a flat color. So if I pop over to my attribute editor here, now notice I have the checkerboard turned off at the moment. So if I go to my attribute editor, that's why I can see here. If you want to just keep it simple, you can always switch to your standard modeling view away from the UV editor to keep it simple at first. If we go to that attribute editor when our model's selected, or if we just right click and go to material attributes, we can see DynoDog underscore matte, and we've got color, transparency, all the rest of it. Notice that at the end of each of these is a little checkerboard icon, and that represents pixels. So if you wanted to use an image instead of using a flat color, you would click this. So for the color, we want to use an image, and we want it to be, now this is a little bit nasty, this huge dialogue. So if we just go to favorites Maya, maybe? No, if we go to just Maya, 2D textures, you see we can have a file. So I'm going to click on file, and now it's dark gray, which doesn't, it doesn't have an image yet. So if I click on image name, I can choose to look for one. So here's an example one. In Maya DynoDog source images, I currently have uvgrid.png, so I can show you what that would look like on it, which is how you would do, look at a texture if we didn't have, if we didn't have that built-in UV grid, we'd use something like this to see how our texturing's going. But we're going to switch to, if we go up, we go to Photoshop. Let's see if it will let us use a PSD. I don't think it will, because this isn't like a very basic flattened PSD, so it probably won't work. No. So what we need to do is export our work. So we're going to go File, Export. Where is it? File, Export, Export As. So I've got my export preferences already set up as to export a PNG, which is the format that we used when we exported the wires out of Maya. So I'm going to stick with that. We don't need transparency or it to be smaller. We're going to let it ask us where to export it each time. That's okay. And then convert to sRGB is a good thing. So yeah, you can see here what my settings are. I might take a screenshot just in case for later. And I will have that in the background in case I need to add it to the notes. So once your preferences are set up for the export, you can just go File, Export, Export As, or Control-Alt-Shift-W. And that will pop up this dialog, and you can see that I'm going to have it as a PNG, so I'd already forgot my default settings. PNG, no transparency, 1024, 100%. Yeah, so all those settings there, same as before. So I'm going to hit export. And where I want it to export to is the folder I'm using for this texture demo. And I'll put it in. So this one, instead of putting it in exports DynoDog, I do want to put it within the Maya project, because it's Maya that's going to need to find it all the time. So I'm going to put it in Maya DynoDog in this source images folder. So when you've got a project set up, as you guys know, Maya knows that the scenes are within this scenes folder, and the autosaves go in the autosave folder. So source images is where it's going to source its textures from, and you can see there's our UV grid. And I'm just going to name this, I'm going to make it DynoDog texture, and I'm going to get rid of the version, and I'm going to save it. And now, if we go back to Maya, you can change the image. Once you've applied a file name to it, you can always just go and a file sort of texture to it. You can always come back here and change what it's looking at. So if we go to over here, pick source images. There's our Dino Dog texture. We hit open, and now it's on our character. Now, final thing to overcome is that he doesn't look like the colors we're using. If we have a look at the examples of other textured characters that I've given you guys, we will go to, let me just fill this window. We'll go to my ACR 103 texturing, and you'll see that for the style that we're working with, the characters, you're not going to use dynamic lighting. You want to use flat lighting so that basically whatever you painted is what you get on the model. So that's the idea of this just simple diffuse texturing. So we need to be able to see every pixel in the image exactly as it appears in the original. How do we do that? Well, Maya has a bunch of different shading modes. You've got wireframe, smooth shade, and you've also got different lighting modes. So default lighting, it just pops in an imaginary set of lights for you. Use all lights. You haven't created any, so it's all going to be black. But you can use this one, use flat lighting. And that means, imagine there's a uniform light that lights everything to the exact color it is in the original texture. And you can see there, it's a match. So if I wanted to, say, turn on my UV lines so I can see what I'm dealing with here with there's a bug in Photoshop. I wanted to see where I should draw the eye. I can see that middle line is where I want to put the pupil. So with your UV lines as well, you don't have to leave it perfectly dark. You can use the opacity to turn it down a bit. So I still see where they are, but I can draw on the layer under it and they won't be in my way. I'm going to use an almost black, but it's got like a dark yellowy quality for the pupil. And it doesn't have to be on this layer. You could make a separate one, but let's keep it simple. Go small, and we will do this. Now, when you export, I'll show you what will happen every so often when you forget to change it. So File, Export, Save, Export As. I'm just going to use Control-Shift-Alt-W, which is like, I use my hand like a claw, and hit W. And if you forget to turn off the wireframe and you hit Export, and you select the one you want to overwrite, and you hit Yes, when you go back to Maya, what you don't see is an immediate update. So Maya by default doesn't automatically update images. So if we go to Material Attributes, you have to go navigate to it and find this and hit Reload. And you'll see that our model now has lines all over it because that was in that bitmap. So if I turn off the lines, Control-Alt-Shift-W, export, and here, double click that, yes. Now, we don't want to have to go through that task every time of forcing the reload in Maya. So I'm going to go to Windows, Preferences, General Preferences, and under Files and Project, I think it is, or File References over here. No. So Settings, Files and Projects. If we go down, I believe automatically reload updated image files. Select, turn that on and hit Save. And now it won't do it the first time because it needs to be notified by Windows, the file system, when something changes. So I'll quickly pop over here and hit Reload just to see that it worked. And now if we were to, let's see, where's his back? Right, his back is here. So if we were to do some, I'm going to select the color here, go a bit darker, and quickly draw in some big stripes on his back. Turn off the UVs and hit Export, Export, double click, hit yes. You'll get used to that. And in Maya, it's already updated. So that is how you go through the process of texturing over here. And remember, because there's no lighting, you know, we could turn on use default lighting, but we're not actually working that way. It's always going to be flat. So you're going to need to paint in your shadows and your highlights over here. So, you know, for example, just a bit of, if we turn on UV lines, after a while you won't need the UV lines as much because, you know, you'll have your rough details blocked in. But if I roughly select the underside of things, maybe the bottom of his eye and the side of his mouth a bit. This is going to look dodgy, but, you know, you'll get the gist. If I was to put in a new layer, set this one to multiply, which if you use a dark color is going to add that to the color below, or any color, it's going to like, you'll see. If I use a dark, even a light gray on this layer, why can't I fill? Right, so that's filled in. So if our color there, if I had it in normal mode, normally we'd see this over, but multiply, basically it does some maths and the color is used to make the one below the darker combination of the two. If we used screen, it would have the opposite effect. It would lighten it, but we're using it to darken. So that's a way you can do your shadows without having to paint another color in there. And you have the ability also to do stuff like image adjustments, hue and saturation. And if we wanted to colorize our shadows, so we brighten it up a little, put more saturation, you can see how I could put like yellow shadows or purple. You can see that his shadow is, it's hard to tell if his shadow's a bit red or if it's just that he has, like we can see some veins and blood in his body, but if we went to red but made it almost perfectly desaturated, but just a little bit warm, I'm going to hit OK, and I will hit, so I'm going to save my texture. In fact, I might even save as, and just increment that texture by 1. So this one is still, the good thing is, you know, we're working in our Photoshop folder when we save our Photoshop stuff. But when we go to export, it will export to the place that we've been using PNG. Actually, yeah. So hit export. Oh wait, see I've got my wires on. I almost did it. So export, export, double click, yes. And in Maya, we've got a shadow, which we can see is way, way, way too dark. And now we come back here, that's obvious. So we can either brighten it or make it more transparent, however you want to do it. I'll just do it like this. Export. Now, you won't have to export this much once you make a little bit of progress. This is just the way of, you know, me seeing what I'm working with first. And then increasingly you can spend more time in here. That's it. That's how to see your texture on your model in Maya, and also how to do a bit of Photoshop texturing. Just quickly, if we pop over to UV editing, you'll notice that now it's using that image in the back of our UV view. So if we go image, turn off dimming, there it is. So if you have checkers turned on, you won't be able to see it, but you turn those off, turn off the dimming, and you can see your image as it, you know, as it maps directly on there. That's the process. That might have seemed like a few steps, but honestly, once you've done it for a little while and you've done that back and forth, it'll become pretty automatic. And if you're not sure, just go back to the bits of the video, or you can have a look in my, you know, if we need to add it somewhere to the notes, we can do that too. Or you can look at the Maya documentation for how to use images as textures. It's something you'll use in every program ever in 3D. So that's it.